let us continue where we left off in the journey home. This is the 7th chapter of the 3rd act. May this reading relax your mind and awaken your heart. One day in Janakpur, while sitting alone on the edge of a lake, a still lake, in the early morning before dawn, a peculiar-looking sadhu sat down beside me. A sadhu is like a wandering spiritual seeker. Very common in India. His opening words were startling. "Beware, there are scorpions in the guise of butterflies." Shaken, I asked why he was saying this. He stared at me intently and spoke again. "Don't open yourself up to demons in the guise of holy men, or you may discover your life in ruins, only when it's too late." "What are you talking about?" I asked, alarmed. "Perhaps I'll tell you another time." Abruptly changing the subject, he introduced himself as Vasudeva and invited me to travel with him to a special historical place. I consented. A handsome man in his early 30s, Vasudeva had the manners of an aristocrat, and his speech rang with the distinction of the Queen's English. He wore white robes, which, curiously, were immaculately clean. His long, jet-black hair was neatly combed. In all of my travels, I had never met such a well-groomed mendicant. He was learned in both spiritual and material subjects, and like many I had met in those parts, was a devotee of Rama. When my new friend invited me to travel by foot for 3 days to reach an obscure holy place, I agreed. We journeyed through countryside the whole way, each day receiving one of my favorite foods, some rice and dal, through begging. Whomever we met along the way was charmed by Vasudeva's gentle nature. Vasudeva insisted on doing all the cooking in an open field or forest, finding 2 rocks to form a stove and balancing the pot between them. While I collected wood for the fire, he prepared the rice and dal with the finesse of an artist sculpting a masterpiece. As we walked along on pilgrimage, we discussed many subjects. Vasudeva seemed to know about everything. But something puzzled me. Behind a mask of cheerfulness, I sensed that this man was tormented. Yet he strained to hide his suffering and hold back his tears, and my affection for him and curiosity about him grew. Strangely, one night while we were traveling together, sleeping in a cowshed to escape the rain, I had a horrible nightmare of being attacked by ghostly beings. I wondered why. After 3 days, we reached our destination, a historical rock in an abandoned field. That evening, as the wind began to gust, we could taste and smell the humidity rising and knew that the monsoons were brewing an imminent downpour. We searched around for shelter and found a small stone structure abandoned long ago. We entered and flushed out several bats that were hanging from the ceiling. They hastily flapped outside. The house consisted of nothing more than one room about 10 feet by 10 feet, with 2 openings for what were once a window and door. The walls were crumbling. Moss and cobwebs were the only furnishings. Once inside, we sat silently as thunder shook the earth. Winds lashed the trees, and a torrential rain poured down. Vasudeva gazed at me through tear-filled eyes. He asked if he could pour out the storm in his heart. Honored that he would confide in me, I consented. Vasudeva shared with me that he had been born to a well-to-do family in Calcutta and received a PhD, becoming a popular, celebrated professor. Having met other devotees, he too began devoted to Rama at this time. One day, 2 distinguished persons visited my office, bringing gifts and food that they claimed were sent by their guru. After several such visits, they invited me to meet the guru, so I did. The guru knew everything about his life, down to the most private details, and was able to read Vasudeva's mind. Astounded, he accepted the man's invitation to visit him regularly. I listened intently, fascinated as ever to learn the story of how a person comes to accept a guru. One day, Vasudeva continued, the guru revealed his mind. I've been carefully examining you, he said. You are young, popular, and intelligent. I need your help. I wish to initiate you into our rites. Vasudeva choked back a strong emotion as he recalled these words. I told him I would think about it. His voice trailed off and he buried his head in his palms, as if trying to bury untold miseries from the past. In desperation, he looked up at me. Richard, he sighed, I don't want to pollute your mind with my horrible story, but I'm going mad. I must tell someone. May I continue? Please do. Let me have a read through quickly to make sure that I can warn any possible triggers. There is the topic of abuse, but nothing graphic is described. But if any time it makes you uncomfortable, you can step out. He stared out the window hole. A lightning bolt highlighted the anguish of his face. Finally, full of despair, he spoke. I commenced to do research on this man, and, to my horror, discovered that he was the leader of a powerful sect, a master in the black tantric arts. His eyes now penetrated mine. Do you know about black tantrics, Richard? No, I admitted. Vasudeva shuddered and his voice trembled. He explained that tantric mysticism was extremely powerful and could either be beneficial or sinister. There are white tantrics who use their powers to serve humankind. Then there are black tantrics who use their powers to exploit people's lives for their own diabolical purposes. They gain terrible influence through unspeakable sacrifices, tantric sex rites, and yoga. This guru was an extremely powerful black tantric, endowed with the power to control people's minds and manipulate their lives. In my research, I was appalled to find that at the time of the rites of initiation, he seized over control that soul for many lifetimes to come. I never went back. But Vasudeva, if you got free, why do you still tremble and quake to think of him? That was only the beginning, he went on. Daily, the Guru's disciples harassed me in my office, in my home, or at any event I attended. I could not escape them. One day, 5 of them barged into my office and surrounded my desk. I felt like a hostage. The next moment, the Guru stood before me to claim my soul. He warned me, "It is too late. I have claimed you as my own. Surrender to me and I will award you the pleasures of fame and fortune beyond your belief. But if you refuse, I will torment you till death." Boiling over with disgust, I refused his command. Cursing me, his eyes blazed with vengeance as he stormed out. Vasudeva sighed. One evening, when I returned home to my widowed mother, I found that she had fallen into his trap. Shaking with anger, she scolded, "Why have you offended that religious man? You must become his disciple." I was shocked. I tried to explain his cruel machinations, but she would not listen. The guru and his henchmen had effectively controlled her. After some days, she threw me out of my house, saying that she would not be a party to my offenses. What was happening to my world? Then, under the sect's powers, the president of my college fired me. Outside, lightning struck a tree and cracked off a huge limb, crashing it down on our rooftop. We sat speechless. An explosion of thunder that seemed to shake the universe followed the devastating lightning bolt. Vasudeva paled. With a faltering voice, he continued, "Homeless and jobless, I was haunted by the Black Tantric's disciples wherever I went. They even influenced the police, who refused to protect me. What could I do but leave Calcutta? By his supernatural powers, this Black Tantric knew where I was at all times and dispatched his followers to harass me. Any job he landed, they convinced the employer to fire Vasudeva, and any room he rented, they convinced the landlord to evict him. He even went to a newspaper to tell his story, but the reporters would not believe him. My life was in tatters, he said. At that moment, a large toad hopped in through our doorway. His amphibious eyes gazed into mine. I wondered if he could be a secret agent of the Black Tantric, and shuddered at the thought. Vasudeva seemed to read my mind. "Are you sure you want me to continue?" he asked. Thunder rumbled in every corner of the sky. "I don't know anymore, Vasudeva," I admitted. I was frightened, but it seemed important that I hear the story. What happened after that? This evil yogi was incensed by my determination and resolved to murder me. With black rites and mantras, he created an invisible weapon that separates the soul from the body. In other words, it slays the victim. But the killing of the body is the least of it. In that interim period between life and death, the Black Tantric gains control of the subtle body covering the soul. As the sinister weapon struck, my body and mind were paralyzed with pain. I felt ghastly beings in ethereal forms haunting me. Begging to be saved, I chanted the name of God. As long as the name was in my mind, the invisible weapon could not end my life. For a full day and night, that weapon tormented me. I knew if I ceased to remember the name for a moment, I would meet a fate worse than death. I chanted ceaselessly. The weapon was powerless to kill me in the presence of God's name. If an evil tantric weapon cannot kill its victim, it must return to slay its sender. The Black Tantric was struck dead, killed by his creation. God's name had saved me. Hearing this spooky tale, a wave of shivers rushed my body from head to toe. I leaned forward to hear more. This evil mystic still exists. He just doesn't have a gross body. Now he controls his disciples from the astral plane, dispatching them to whoever I hide to seek revenge. They hunt me down at all times. I cannot settle in any one place because within a matter of weeks they terrorize me. The furious storm outside was beginning to subside. In the emerging silence, Vasudeva sighed. It is for this reason, contrary to my will and nature, that I have become a homeless mendicant. I know that if I genuinely surrender to God, He will protect me. But until that day comes, I must run and hide in the guise of a holy man. Crickets began to sing. Vasudeva looked deeply into my eyes. I'm sorry to tell you all this. I've kept it to myself for years, but I had to speak to someone. Richard, I have no one to blame. It's ultimately my own doing. I couldn't understand how he could blame himself and asked him to explain. Modestly, he attributed his present troubles to past life karmas. I don't know what I've done to deserve my miserable lot in life, Vasudeva concluded, but I know that it's justified, and I know that if I sincerely pass this test and surrender to the Lord, He will deliver me. Vasudeva's trembling hand now held mine as he made one last appeal. Because you are my friend, I must advise you to abandon me, lest you get implicated. If I don't see you in the morning, I will understand. My brother, as you search for your path, please be cautious. You are exposing yourself to powerful beings, and not all are holy. And please, pray for me. We sat in silence. I could not speak a word. I knew from what I'd already observed in India that many gurus had strong powers, including the power to sway followers to do whatever they asked. I was more terrified of what my companion had revealed to me than I had been of that pack of rabid dogs. The dogs I had at least been able to see and fend off, but now, how does one fend off the invisible forces of evil that could attack an unsuspecting person trying to follow a spiritual path? Vasudeva then lay down on the dirt to sleep, with his arm as a pillow. But sleep was far from my mind. I gazed through the hole in the wall. There were stars emerging from the parting clouds, but no moon. Next to me, Vasudeva tossed anxiously in his sleep. Am I willing to be implicated in the harrowing complexity of his life? I wondered. The thought caused me to shiver. I can think of no other way to help him except to pray. That is all he asked of me. As he tossed, turned, and groaned in his sleep, I walked far away into the night, praying that the path I was taking would be a safe one, and that he too might find safety and peace. Thank you for listening. We're not quite finished the 7th chapter of the 3rd act of the journey home, but that's a good spot to pause so that we may continue our story at a later date. Namaste. If you have any insights or any questions from our reading today, I certainly welcome